As a fan of a lot of the projects that Ubisoft has pumped out in the past, this topic is one that is kind of a little bit heartbreaking, for lack of a better term, to talk about as opposed to the other ones in the past. Well, for those of you who are familiar with Ubisoft, you guys probably know them for a lot of their series like Far Cry, Rayman Legends, Assassin's Creed, obviously most notably, and many other games, The Crew, if you like racing, that kind of stuff. But as of late, you probably know them more for their controversy than for their actual content. And as unfortunate as that is, what we might be facing here is the end of an era for Ubisoft. Because one thing is clear, they need to make a change soon, or it's going to be too late for them, and we might not be getting any more Ubisoft games for the foreseeable future. Now, let's dive into what I'm trying to talk about here. So, starting things off, let's talk about Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Obviously, one of their more, highly acclaimed projects with regards to the hype that was behind it. Obviously, it comes from a popular IP, Avatar, being a really popular film series, and it seemed like an easy slam dunk, right? Ubisoft has this tendency, they have a formula for open world games. Unfortunately, it's been getting really tiresome of a formula for open world games, but that still didn't stop them from wanting to go ahead and pump out Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, which should have been a slam dunk. However, it was not. Only 2 weeks after launch, the game was already on 40% sale on popular platforms such as Steam. That is something that is usually reserved for a game that is not meeting the sales expectations as it was expected to. So obviously, a lot of people are in doubt as to whether or not the game is even going to go ahead and get a sequel, since the game was already tackling its own story set within the Avatar universe. And obviously, for Avatar fans, I'm sure they probably, if they did enjoy the game, would have loved to have seen the continuation of the story in some way, shape, or form. However, this should not come as a surprise, because it's a trend that unfortunately Ubisoft has followed up with the rest of their IPs. Switching on over to Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones was a game that was hyped up as far back as 2013, really because of the release of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I cannot believe that game is already going to turn 12 years this year? Yeah, no, that is way... Oh my gosh, time is flying by, I'm old. Anyways, 2013 Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag popularized the pirate genre, mixed in with the Assassin's Creed genre, and made it this perfect combination that, in theory, and for a lot of people's opinions, turned it into the best pirate game to date. And what popularized this game so much and cemented it into the fandom was really the navigating mechanic. So the ship sailing mechanic, building your own crew, building up your own ship, going ahead, buying resources, plundering, things like that, getting into ship battles, evading the tornadoes at sea, things like that. It was a really fun game, and Ubisoft thought that it was a really easy slam dunk, so they, in their heads, they thought that they could take that formula, apply it into a open world game, fully centered around only the ship naval combat, which entirely, completely destroys the plot behind Assassin's Creed 4, in the sense that a lot of the enjoyment from that also came from the exploration on foot in the islands, and then only focus on that one portion for Skull and Bones, which was the naval combat. So a lot of people already were a little bit disillusioned by that, especially with it being, I think they touted it as a quadruple A game or something like that. It had a lot of issues during development. As a matter of fact, the game was so low on in terms of its hype and how much they kept on having to restructure. It was in development hell for quite a while, but it was one of those projects that they had to already pump out, and it's one of those things that it came out, and unfortunately, it launched to under 1 million players, and that is free trial players included. Keep in mind, nowadays, the game barely breaks the triple digits for a 24-hour peak. The game, I think its all-time peak was only in like 2,000 something players. That was not good at all. And unfortunately, that again is a trend that follows them on to IP, with the next one being Prince of Persia, obviously being one of their more older and popular IPs for the company. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown being the most recent game that released for Ubisoft. This one was really unfortunate because this game was actually critically acclaimed. It was actually a very enjoyable game. I never played it myself, but from those who did, I keep hearing that the game was actually a breath of fresh air to what the usual Ubisoft game is. But unfortunately, it was a good game at the wrong time, and unfortunately the game ended up with bad sales. And speaking of bad sales, and speaking of good game for wrong time, X Defiant is another game that also shares in the same trend as Ubisoft's flopping franchises, where it's another good game that came out during a bad time. The game that touted no skill-based matchmaking, trying to go head-to-head with Call of Duty. And unfortunately, the game would have been so well received if it weren't for the fact that the updates that they pumped out just were not significant enough. But ironically enough, the final updates that they pumped out before announcing the death of the game, where they pumped out all the content for, I believe, Season 3 all the way up to like Season 8, whatever they had ready, they just kind of pumped it into the game. And that content in and of itself was so enjoyable. A lot of people have this common idea that the game would have actually thrived and survived if they had just managed their content releases a little bit better, because they felt like there was a little bit of a drought in terms of content. Players really enjoyed the gunplay, but they just did not have enough to do to justify coming back every single day, and unfortunately that affected their numbers, leading to X Defiant to shut down. And now for the cream of the crop, Assassin's Creed Shadow. Let's be honest, guys, we all saw this one coming a mile away. I am a huge Assassin's Creed fan in the sense that I've been playing the series since Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but I know I'm a little bit late into the franchise. I didn't start off back with the original ones, though I did go back and play all the original ones as well, from Altair up until the current day ones, Assassin's Creed Mirage. And now their upcoming title, Assassin's Creed Shadows, is ironically enough in the shadows of the great games that came before it. So Assassin's Creed Shadow has a lot of expectations to meet, and right now it is just being panned left, right, and center, and it's been delayed. The game is apparently so undercooked that the only reason it got delayed, because it was initially supposed to release in late 2024, the reason why we're going to be getting it in February 2025 this year, already next month, is because apparently the developers really begged and pleaded for it because it was just not ready. Aside from that, the game faces backlash for a lot of cultural insensitivity, according to a lot of the Japanese fan base for Assassin's Creed, because for a game that touts itself to be historically accurate, there's just some things that are considered culturally insensitive, such as a figurine that I'm going to see if I can put a picture of it displaying on screen right now, for a Torii Gate figurine of Assassin's Creed Shadow showing the protagonist, but it's a one-legged Torii Gate. Obviously, that has some really dark implications. For those of you guys who do not know, the one-legged Torii Gate is something synonymous with World War II. I believe it was after the bombings, the nuclear bombings, it was one of the Torii Gates that was left standing, and that's a symbolization that, you know, their culture did not falter, and it has a lot of cultural significance to Japan. So obviously, using that to market your Japanese Assassin's Creed game, which already is not featuring a Japanese male protagonist in the role, just kind of comes off as a little bit insensitive, especially with the fact that this is a game that has been hyped up and really desired for a really long time, up there with Ancient Egypt, which we did end up getting in the form of Assassin's Creed Origins. And unfortunately, a lot of people also really dislike the fact that the game features a African protagonist, not for the sake of it being an African protagonist, but just given the context of the game. You have a game set in feudal Japan. Why did you not have a Japanese protagonist, right? It kind of goes without saying. Assassin's Creed is a game that also likes to go ahead and represent the cultures based on the time periods that it was set in. And obviously, yeah, Yasuke was a real character. However, the game did take its own freedoms in, you know, filling in the blanks of historical questions or that linger on up to this day, and saying that he is now going to be a main protagonist. It just felt a little bit inconsiderate, considering the fact that Yasuke was also a real-life historical figure. Assassin's Creed protagonists have never been historical figures. They never existed in real life. They're all completely fictional characters. So it just felt like this one was really, like, they really had to search for it in order to, like, force it into the content. I'm sure it would have been fine if they just took Yasuke and kept him as an open-world character, you know, his own side character, or even make him one of the main characters in the plot, just not the protagonist of the game, because when you're trying to relive feudal Japan, it's the immersion just a little bit when you're playing as someone who you feel like is there more as a DEI than as an actual fluid character that is meant to be within the context of the game. Now, that is not the only thing that's panning the game down. Unfortunately, the gameplay itself, a lot of people have touted that for the gap between Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Assassin's Creed Shadows, which Valhalla, I believe, came out in 2020, or 2021. No, I believe it was 2020. It was already going to be a 5-year gap, and people just don't feel like the graphical updates or even the controls of the game really justify that 5-year gap. A lot of people are suggesting that the game kind of looks very similar in regards to Valhalla and even Mirage, for that matter, which was supposed to be a DLC for Valhalla, but just a little bit improved. And for something that has a half a decade gap, I can't really say I blame the fans. Obviously, when you have something that big, I mean, just think about it. 5 years. Take Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Unity. One came out in 2009, the other came out in 2014, a 5-year gap, insane graphical difference. As a matter of fact, Assassin's Creed Unity to this day is literally still considered to be one of the best looking Assassin's Creed games within the franchise, graphically being a game that is very tough to follow up on and overcome. Now, and this leads into the current problems that Ubisoft faces as well, where in their own studios, they're having some turmoil. So obviously Ubisoft is a company that is run in different subsections scattered around the world. So obviously there's Ubisoft Quebec, Ubisoft Montreal, Ubisoft Sofia, and Ubisoft France. Their France studio just had a strike with over 700 employees going on strike over pay disputes as well as wanting to work from home. Now this is something where if you do not take care of the developers that make your games, what makes you think they're going to put their highest quality efforts into making a good game that is going to present you with good returns? And now, with what's also happening and circling the rumors about how Ubisoft is potentially going to get bought out by Tencent, this begs the question. If you look at the most recent franchise reports for Ubisoft, right? Like how their games have been performing, even with games like, for example, Star Wars Outlaws, which, by the way, was supposed to be the easiest slam dunk of all time. That literally brought upon the Star Wars brand name, which is a brand name synonymous with such a passionate fan base. Star Wars is one of the most passionate fan bases of all time, and the game releases to only a dismal 1 million units sold within the first month. For something touting the Star Wars name, that's almost as bad as what happened to the Avengers game released by Square Enix a few years back. Now, where does Ubisoft go from here? Why is Ubisoft so content with their lackluster releases and their lackluster returns? On top of that, they recently just released a Rayman game that is entirely revolving around NFTs. Why would a company that is already on the verge, on the precipice of just completely pit diving down into obscurity, release something that a lot of people really hate with a passion? So this is where we kind of have to put on our, tinfoil hats here, get into a little bit of some conspiracy theories, because here is what a lot of people are starting to think. Ubisoft might be purposefully releasing some lackluster game to have the reviews tank in order for the shareholder value to decrease, so that way Tencent can go ahead and perform a buyout. If this is remotely true, obviously doing that on purpose, it should be illegal. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in the majority of the places in the world. However, they might be intentionally, it feels like, with the way they've been performing, they're doing that to lower their value. Tencent comes in, buys it out, Ubisoft goes private, right? Because they buy out all the shares. Now, if that were to happen, the only discrepancy with that idea is that, for those of you guys who do not know, the Guillemot family owns Ubisoft right now, right? Like, they own pretty much the big stakes in the company, and they want to maintain control, but they obviously probably don't want to put all their money into all these projects. So maybe what's probably happening here is that with all that friction, Tencent undoubtedly is going to want full control over the properties. Tencent was already set to make one of the Assassin's Creed games, I think, releasing on mobile, Assassin's Creed Jade. So if one thing is to be clear, is that whatever happens to Ubisoft after this year, Assassin's Creed Shadows has to be a slam dunk, because if it is not, then Ubisoft really faces such a real threat of becoming obscure or maybe being bought out by Tencent, which might be what they want. I don't know. Obviously, this is a little bit of conspiracy theory. It might be what they're going for. It might not be. And maybe they really are just that oblivious. And if they are, unfortunately, I honestly don't see Ubisoft lasting that much longer. Not to mention, a lot of their projects recently have been stuck in development hell. Look at Beyond Good and Evil 2. A project that I believe was announced as far back as, 2008? Before Obama was even president, I'm pretty sure. It was announced all the way far as back as that. And we still don't have the game. I think the latest trailer that released for the game was back in 2017, where they released like a cinematic trailer with some gameplay of what they want the game to be. But we still don't actually know, and they still tout that the game is in active development. If you expect me to believe that that is not one of the biggest ways to waste money for a big company such as Ubisoft, then I don't know what to tell you, because honestly, that's exactly what it is. So if Ubisoft wants to go ahead and continue, they're going to have to go ahead and stop what they're doing, reevaluate the quality of their products, and try to focus up on doing quality over quantity. Because right now, as it stands, it feels like the only thing Ubisoft really has going for it is Rainbow Six Siege. And unfortunately, Rainbow Six Siege is not something that is significant enough in order to literally hold up high the entire company. If Assassin's Creed falls, Ubisoft falls. So I guess this would literally have to mean that Ubisoft has to make a monumental shift, or as I like to call it, the end of an era, in order to be able to adapt and move on forward in the way that gamers really want. Gamers don't want to be pandered to. Gamers just want a fun story. Obviously, I don't speak for everyone, but I think I speak for the majority when I say that we'd all much rather have a really good game story set around an interesting, cast of characters that actually goes on for multiple game series and actually has a fun and engaging story with great mechanics and great gameplay, right? That's what everyone always says. And Ubisoft keeps on touting about how that's what they want to do, but consistently, time and time again, over the past, 5, maybe 6 years, if we go as far back as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they have not really been releasing or promising or even coming nearly as close as following up on these promises, because Ubisoft time and time again has showed that they're more interested in the short-term gain as well. Kind of similar to Activision, if we're really being honest about it. I mean, look as far back as Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That game literally had the ability for you to pay in order to get XP bonuses. You would have to buy that from the shop, and then that would help you go up on the skill gap necessary to actually complete the game at the appropriate level. And that was one of the more, predatory practices that Ubisoft had done in the past. Obviously, Assassin's Creed Origins being their first quote-unquote open-world Assassin's Creed game with regards to the RPG aesthetic that was popularized by The Witcher, at least in the sense that Assassin's Creed is copying it from. That game came with its own loot boxes in the form of Heka chests, which I don't think exists anymore. I think they ended up removing that or patching it out of the game. The thing is that Ubisoft just kind of feels like they're so out of touch, so out of the loop with what's actually popular in the gaming community, that if they do not adapt, unfortunately, Ubisoft is just not going to last. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Please keep the discussion civil. If you guys enjoy these videos, please go ahead and drop a like in the like button down below. Or if you guys did not enjoy it, please leave a dislike and let me know why. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Have a good one, guys. Peace out.